A millionaire with no time for hugs crosses paths with a little boy who asks for something money can't buy. And that request changes everything. Matthew Collins adjusted his tie for the third time while looking at his reflection in the dark glass of the corporate building. The meeting with the investors from New York had ended 2 hours ago, but their words still echoed in his head like their scratched record. $15 million approved for the startup's expansion, contracts signed, ambitious goals set for the next quarter. It was exactly what he had planned, dreamed of, and worked tirelessly to achieve. So, why did he feel that emptiness in his chest? Thursday night was warm in Boston, with that typical fall humidity that stuck to the skin like a second layer of clothing. Matthew walked through the downtown streets, avoiding hurried pedestrians and cars that honked impatiently in traffic. Normally, he would be in his luxury apartment in Beacon Hill, reviewing spreadsheets or preparing the presentation for the board meeting the following morning. But that night, something pulled him to the streets, to the movement of ordinary people living lives he didn't know. The night market downtown was buzzing with life. Colorful stalls stretched along the sidewalk, selling everything from hot pastries to handcrafted jewelry. The smell of sugar from cotton candy mixed with the sweet aroma of kettle corn, while entire families circulated between the stands, children asking for sweets and young couples sampling freshly fried snacks. Matthew observed all of this with the curiosity of a foreigner visiting an unknown country. He wore an impeccable gray suit, Italian leather shoes, and a Swiss watch that cost more than many people earned in a year. Among those simple people, with their casual clothes and spontaneous laughter, he felt like a fish out of water. But there was something hypnotizing about that atmosphere, an authenticity that his corporate world lacked. That's when his eyes fixed on a scene that made him stop in the middle of the crowd. Near a craft stand, a little boy was sitting on the ground with his legs crossed and a drawing notebook supported on his knees. His brown hair was messy, his sandals worn and battered, and light blue shorts stained with colorful paint told stories of entire afternoons dedicated to art. The boy seemed completely oblivious to the movement around him, focused on bringing to life a drawing that showed a tall man holding the hand of a small child. Matthew felt his chest tighten in a way he couldn't explain. There was something in that boy's pure concentration, in the way he held the colored pencil with his little fingers, that touched a part of his soul that he thought had been dead for a long time. The boy raised his face at that moment, and there, eyes met. It was a clean look, without judgments, without calculations, without interest, just the genuine curiosity of a child observing an unknown adult. In that instant, Matthew felt stripped of all his titles, achievements, and victories. He was no longer the CEO of Boston's most promising technology company, no longer the motivational speaker who filled auditoriums, no longer the man who graced the covers of business magazines. He was just a man in a suit looking at a boy in worn flip-flops, and the distance between the two seemed greater than any net profit he had ever accumulated. He approached slowly, as if not wanting to break the spell of that moment. It was then that he noticed the woman sitting behind a small makeshift table, meticulously organizing craft pieces. She wore faded jeans and a light cotton blouse, her hair tied in a low bun that let escape some rebellious strands. Her deep dark circles betrayed sleepless nights and days that began before sunrise, but there was a silent dignity in her movements, a contained strength that caught attention. Her hands worked with precision among embroidered bracelets, beaded, necklaces and small watercolor paintings. Each piece was positioned carefully, as if it were a precious treasure. Matthew observed how she always kept a corner of her eye turned to her son, a maternal radar that worked even when she was concentrated on her work. It was a subtle and constant dance: organize, sell, care for, protect. The boy finished coloring and raised the notebook towards his mother with a smile that lit up his entire face. She stopped what she was doing, observed the drawing with genuine attention, and smiled back. It was a tired smile, but sincere, loaded with a love that needed no words to be understood. She ran her hand through her son's hair with a tenderness that made Matthew remember something he couldn't name, a distant and nebulous memory of his own childhood. For long minutes, Matthew stood there, observing that scene as if it were a movie he had never seen before. There was something magnetic about that family of two, something that pulled him with a gentle but irresistible force. The boy went back to drawing, now creating hand-holding figures under an orange sun that seemed bigger than the people on the paper. Matthew noticed how he held the pencil firmly, how his tongue appeared in the corner of his mouth when he concentrated, how his eyes sparkled with each new color added to the drawing. The woman, for her part, continued her silent work, selling a bracelet here, explaining the technique of an embroidery there, always with patience and delicacy. Matthew noticed that she never forced a sale, never insisted when someone just looked and moved on. There was an honesty in her approach that contrasted drastically with the aggressive business world he knew so well. Time seemed to have stopped in that small universe of silent care. Matthew felt like a voyeur of a life he had never experienced, a parallel reality where success wasn't measured in figures and achievements, but in sincere smiles and holding hands. He didn't know why he remained there, only felt that something in that boy and that woman pulled him in a direction he didn't know. When he finally moved away from the stall, it was late at night. Matthew walked to his imported car, but before starting the engine he sat for several minutes, trying to process what he had felt. For the first time in years, a business meeting wasn't the most important thing of his day. For the first time in a long time he had witnessed something that no financial report could quantify, the simple beauty of a family that was content with little but possessed something that all his money couldn't buy. That night, Matthew arrived home and didn't turn on his computer. He didn't review emails, didn't prepare presentations, didn't check stock quotes. He just sat on the balcony of his apartment, looking at the city lights, thinking of a boy in worn sandals who drew families holding hands as if it were the most natural thing in the world. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll continue. The following days were a silent torture for Matthew. While conducting meetings about international expansion, signing million-dollar contracts, and approving budgets for the next quarter, his mind constantly wandered to that night market. The image of the boy painting hand-holding figures haunted him like a gentle ghost, appearing at the most inopportune moments, transforming numbers into colors and spreadsheets into childish drawings. On Wednesday, during a video conference with American investors, Matthew caught himself unconsciously drawing on the margin of his papers. They were simple figures, like those he had seen in the boy's notebook. A tall man, a woman, a child. When he realized what he was doing, he quickly erased the traces and tried to focus on the discussion about market share and growth projections. But the executive's words seemed distant, as if they reached him through a long, dark tunnel. His assistant, Marcy, an efficient 40-year-old woman who had worked with him for 5 years, began to notice the changes. Matthew, who always arrived at the office at 7 in the morning on the dot, started to arrive a few minutes late. His responses to emails, previously immediate and precise, began to take a few hours. During meetings he seemed distant, as if part of his attention was elsewhere. On Thursday, exactly 1 week after the first encounter, Matthew made a decision that surprised even himself. He cancelled the business dinner he had scheduled with an important client, exchanged his suit for a more casual dress shirt and jeans, and headed downtown again. His heart beat rapidly, as if he were a teenager going on a first date. The market was even busier than the previous week. It was the busy eve of a holiday, and families were taking advantage of the mild evening to stroll and shop. Matthew walked among the stores, pretending to be interested in leather goods and jewelry, but his eyes anxiously searched for a small table with crafts and watercolors. When he finally found it, he felt relief mixed with nervousness that he hadn't experienced in years. There was the boy sitting in the same position as the previous week, but this time drawing something different. There were 3 figures together under a huge orange sun, which seemed larger than the people on the paper. The line was childish, but there was something touching in the way he had positioned the figures close to each other, as if they formed a small group united against the world. The woman was also there, organizing her pieces with the same care as the previous week. She wore a light blue blouse that highlighted her dark eyes, and her hair was loose, falling in gentle waves over her shoulders. When Matthew approached, she looked up and recognized him immediately. She said nothing, just smiled discreetly and continued her work. Matthew felt awkward, as if he didn't know how to start a conversation. He, who commanded meetings with dozens of executives, who spoke to audiences of hundreds of people, who negotiated million-dollar contracts, was nervous to speak to a woman who sold crafts at a market. He opted to examine the pieces displayed on the table, picking up an embroidered bracelet with colored threads that formed a delicate pattern. "It's really handmade," she said with a soft but firm voice. "Each bracelet takes about 3 hours to complete." Matthew nodded, impressed with the delicacy of the work. Each stitch was perfect, each color chosen with care. It was the kind of dedication he rarely saw in his corporate world, where everything was done in a hurry and focused only on the final result. "How much is it?" he asked, knowing that the price would be trivial compared to what he spent on a meal. $15, she replied, observing his reaction. Matthew took out his wallet and pulled out a $50 bill. "Keep the change," he said, trying to sound casual. The woman looked at him with an expression that mixed gratitude and suspicion. "You don't need to, sir. I have change." "No, please. It's just that I think the work is really beautiful." Matthew felt strange, as if he were lying, although he was being completely sincere. She accepted the money with a nod, putting it in a small wooden box. The boy, who had stopped drawing to observe the transaction, smiled at Matthew with that same purity that had touched him the previous week. "Do you like to draw?" asked Matthew, crouching down to be at the boy's height. "I like it a lot," replied the boy enthusiastically. "My mum says I draw beautifully." "She's right. Can I see?" The boy proudly extended the notebook, showing the page with the 3 figures under the big sun. Matthew observed the drawing with genuine attention, noticing how the boy had taken care to draw smiles on all the faces, how he had added small details that showed affection for the art. "It's really beautiful. How old are you?" "7, replied the boy, extending his hand with open fingers. "And you?" The childish question drew a sincere smile from Matthew. 36. "Wow, you're really old," said the boy with the brutal honesty of children. The woman blushed slightly and gently reprimanded her son. "Noah, that's not how you talk." "It's okay," laughed Matthew. "He's right, I am quite old." It was the first time he heard the boy's name, and somehow that made everything more real. Noah, a simple, beautiful name that suited that child who drew happy families with the naturalness of someone who believed the world was a good place. "And what's your name?" asked Noah with typical age curiosity. "Matthew," he replied, feeling strange to present only his first name without titles or positions. "Matthew," repeated Noah, as if he were trying out the sound. "It's a nice name. Sounds like a king's name." The comparison made Matthew laugh again. In his corporate world, he was treated like a kind of king, with people vying for his attention and approval. But there at the market, he was just Matthew, a man who bought bracelets and admired children's drawings. They talked for a few more minutes, with Noah showing other drawings and explaining each figure with the seriousness of a professional artist. Matthew bought 2 more bracelets, praised the quality of the work and said goodbye, promising to return the following week. As he was moving away, he heard Noah ask his mother, "Mum, why does Matthew look sad?" The question hit him like a punch in the stomach. He stopped, pretending to look at a nearby stall, and pricked up his ears to hear the answer. "Sometimes people are sad, my love," replied the woman, with a wisdom that went beyond her apparent age, "even when they have many good things." "But why?" "Because sometimes we forget what's really important." Matthew continued walking, but the woman's words echoed in his head throughout the journey back home. For the first time in years, he looked in the mirror and didn't see a successful man. He saw only someone who had forgotten what was really important, someone who had traded happiness for success and discovered they weren't the same thing. That night, he called his mother, who lived in a small town in western Massachusetts. It had been months since they had spoken, him always claiming to be too busy with work. They talked for over an hour, her telling him about the neighbors, about the garden she was cultivating, about the TV shows she watched. Subjects that he previously considered irrelevant, but that now filled him with a sweet and melancholy nostalgia. When he hung up the phone, Matthew realized that he had spent years building an empire, but had forgotten to build a life. And a 7-year-old boy with worn sandals and a drawing notebook had shown him this with the simplicity of someone who still believed that drawing happy families was the most natural thing in the world. Matthew's third visit to the market was different. This time he didn't arrive empty-handed. He stopped at an art supply store on the way and bought a box of 72 colored pencils, a set of special markers, and 2 high-quality drawing notebooks. When he approached the table where Sarah organized her crafts, he felt a nervousness he hadn't experienced since adolescence. Noah was sitting on the ground, as always, but this time he seemed frustrated. He was holding a worn-down colored pencil, almost a stub, and trying to color what appeared to be a sunset. The orange color had run out, and he was trying to improvise by mixing yellow with red, without much success. "Hi, Noah," said Matthew, crouching beside the boy. "Hi, Matthew," replied Noah without taking his eyes off the drawing. "I can't make the sun look nice. My orange pencil ran out." Matthew smiled and extended the bag with the gifts. "Good thing I brought this then." Noah's eyes lit up when he saw the contents of the bag. The box of colored pencils seemed like a treasure to the child, each new color an infinite possibility for creation. He looked at his mother, silently asking for permission. Sarah observed the gifts with a complex expression. There was gratitude, but also hesitation. "You didn't have to, sir. This must have been expensive." "It was nothing," lied Matthew. "I saw that he likes to draw and thought he could use them." "Can I accept them, Mom?" asked Noah, with an anxiety that touched Matthew's heart. Sarah nodded, but not before looking directly into Matthew's eyes. "Thank you. This means a lot to us." There was something in the way she said those words that made Matthew realize she wasn't just talking about the drawing materials. She was talking about the gesture, about the fact that someone had noticed her son, had cared about his happiness. Noah immediately began to explore the new colors, testing shades he had never used before. Matthew sat beside him, observing the creative process with fascination. The boy worked with intense concentration, mixing colors and creating nuances that revealed an impressive natural talent. "You're very good at drawing," commented Matthew, sincerely impressed. "My mum taught me," said Noah proudly. "She draws very beautifully too. Show him, Mum." Sarah blushed slightly but pulled out a notebook from under the table. Though they were delicate watercolors, urban landscapes and portraits that demonstrated refined technique and a keen artistic eye. Matthew flipped through the pages with genuine admiration. "You have a lot of talent," he said, looking at Sarah. "Have you ever thought about exhibiting in a gallery?" She laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. "Galleries are for people who have time and money to invest in art. I need to work." "Where do you work?" asked Matthew, realizing he had touched on a sensitive subject. "A few places," she replied evasively. "I do some odd jobs during the day and come here at night." Matthew noticed that she didn't want to go into details and respected her privacy. But something in the way she spoke, in the way she avoided his gaze, told him that her life was much harder than it appeared. While they talked, Noah continued drawing with his new colors. This time, he created a more elaborate scene, a market, with colorful stalls, people walking, and in the center 3 figures close to each other. A woman with loose hair, a man in a dress shirt, and a small child. Above the scene, he wrote in crooked letters, "My family at the market." Matthew felt his heart race when he saw the drawing. It wasn't possible that Noah had included him as part of the family, but there he was, drawn with care and affection, as if he were already part of that small world. "It's beautiful, my love," said Sarah, observing the drawing over her son's shoulder. "But you know that Matthew isn't part of our family, right? He's just a friend." "I know," replied Noah with the naturalness of children. "But I like him, and he likes us too. You can tell by the way he looks." The child's words created an awkward silence, Matthew felt exposed, as if Noah had read thoughts that he himself didn't know he had. Sarah looked at him with an expression that mixed curiosity and caution. "Noah has a very fertile imagination," she said, trying to ease the moment. "All children do," responded Matthew. "It's one of the most beautiful things about childhood." They continued talking while Noah drew. Matthew discovered that Sarah had studied graphic arts for 2 years before dropping out of college. He didn't ask why she had stopped, but imagined it had to do with the pregnancy and the absence of Noah's father. "Did you ever want to go back to school?" he asked. "Want, yes," she replied with a melancholic smile. "But wanting and being able are different things, right? I have to take care of Noah, work, pay the bills. There's no time or money left for studying." Matthew nodded but kept thinking about those words. In his world, money had never been an obstacle to anything. He bought what he wanted, traveled where he desired, invested in any project he found interesting. But here was a talented woman with dreams and ambitions who had been forced to give up everything to care for her son alone. "And Noah's father?" he asked, immediately regretting the indiscretion. Sarah's face hardened slightly. "He's not part of our lives," she said, with a firmness that indicated the subject was closed. Matthew respected her silence, but noticed the hurt behind the words. There was a story there, a wound that hadn't completely healed. He felt like an intruder for having asked, but also felt an inexplicable anger toward a man who had abandoned such a special woman and child. The night progressed, and gradually the other stalls began to close. Sarah organized her products, storing each piece with care. Noah yawned but refused to stop drawing with his new colors. Matthew helped pack up the paintings and bracelets, feeling useful in a way he didn't experience at the office. "Do you live far from here?" he asked when they finished arranging everything. "In Dorchester," replied Sarah. "About 20 minutes by bus." "Can I give you a ride?" Sarah hesitated. "You don't have to trouble yourself. We're used to the bus." "It's no trouble," insisted Matthew. "It's late and Noah's tired." She looked at her son, who really did seem exhausted after a whole day of drawings and new colors. "All right," she said finally. "Thank you." The journey to Dorchester was silent. Noah slept in the back seat, hugging one of his new notebooks. Sarah gave discreet directions, and Matthew drove through the dark streets of the suburb, observing a world he rarely visited. When they reached their destination, Matthew was surprised by the simplicity of the building. It was a modest housing complex, with small apartments and walls that needed a new coat of paint. But there was something welcoming about that place, a sense of community that his luxury condominium had never provided. "Thanks for the ride," said Sarah, gently waking Noah. "You're welcome," replied Matthew. "See you next week at the market." "See you next week," she confirmed, with a smile that seemed more relaxed than in previous encounters. As he drove back home, Matthew thought about the difference between the two worlds. His, full of luxury and amenities, but empty of genuine affection, and theirs, simple and modest, but overflowing with love and mutual care. For the first time in years, he wondered which of the two was really richer. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like. Tell us which city you're watching us from will continue. Visits to the market became a sacred ritual in Matthew's life. Every Thursday, he left the office early, changed from his suit into casual clothes, and drove downtown with an anxiety that mixed nervousness and joy. The meetings with Sarah and Noah became the highlight of his week, more important than any business meeting or product launch. In the following weeks, Matthew began to bring small gifts for Noah regularly. They weren't just drawing materials, but also children's storybooks, special juice boxes, hot cheese rolls from the most famous bakery in the city. Each gift was chosen with care, thinking about what might make Noah smile in that way that illuminated his entire face. Sarah, initially suspicious, began to accept the gestures more naturally. Matthew noticed that she was getting used to his presence, lowering the guard she always kept raised. Gradually, she began to tell more about her life, about the challenges of raising Noah alone, about the dreams she had put in a drawer to devote herself entirely to her son. "What exactly do you do for work?" asked Sarah one Thursday while watching. Matthew helped Noah color a particularly complex drawing. "I have a technology company," he replied, trying to sound casual. "We develop apps and digital solutions for other companies." "Must be interesting," she said without asking more questions. Matthew realized that she wasn't really interested in details about his work, and that surprised him. In his corporate world, people always wanted to know more about his company, about his profits, about his connections. Sarah, however, seemed more interested in knowing what kind of person he was than what kind of professional. "And you?" he asked. "Besides the market, what do you do?" Sarah hesitated for a moment. "I clean houses during the week, and on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I work at a sewing studio in the neighborhood." Matthew nodded but felt a tightness in his chest. Imagining Sarah cleaning other people's houses when she had so much artistic talent caused him a sense of injustice that he couldn't explain. "Must be tiring," he commented. "It is," she admitted, "but I need to make sure Noah has what he needs. He's my priority." Sarah's dedication to her son touched Matthew deeply. There was something heroic in the way she faced all difficulties without complaining, always putting Noah's well-being above her own. It was a silent strength that he had never encountered in his world of executives and entrepreneurs. Noah, in turn, became attached to Matthew with the speed and intensity typical of children. He saved all the drawings he made to show his friend, Matthew, as he had begun to call him. His favorite themes continued to be families, but now he always included 3 figures: a woman, a man, and a child. "Why do you always draw 3 people?" asked Matthew one of those afternoons. "Because that's how family is," replied Noah with the simplicity of his age. "My mom, you, and me. We're a small family, but we're a family." Matthew felt his throat tighten. "But I'm not part of your family, Noah. I'm just a friend." "That's okay," said the boy, continuing to draw. "But you take care of us like family. So in my heart, you're family." Sarah heard the conversation and gently intervened. "Noah, you can't talk like that. Matthew has his own life, his own commitments. You can't be creating expectations." "I know, Mom," replied Noah, not seeming upset. "But as long as he comes here, I'll draw him with us. Is that okay?" Matthew smiled and messed up the boy's hair. "Yes, that's okay." But Sarah's words left him thoughtful. She was right to warn her son about not creating expectations. Matthew really did have a completely different life, full of commitments and responsibilities that didn't include them, or at least that's what he tried to convince himself. The truth was that Matthew was changing, and the changes were increasingly visible. At the office, he began to arrive later and leave earlier. He started to delegate more responsibilities, something unthinkable months before. His meetings became more objective, shorter. He seemed to have lost patience for endless discussions about strategies and projections. Marcy, his assistant, began to make comments about the changes. "You're different, Matthew. More relaxed, less stressed. Are you in therapy?" "Something like that," he replied evasively. The truth was that his visits to the market had become his therapy. Talking with Sarah, watching Noah draw, participating in that simple but meaningful world was healing wounds he didn't know he had. For the first time in years, he felt useful not for what he produced or earned, but for what he gave and received in return. On a Thursday in September, Matthew arrived at the market and found Noah visibly upset. The boy was sitting on the ground, but not drawing. He was just looking at the blank notebook with a sad expression that broke Matthew's heart. "What happened, champ?" he asked, crouching beside the boy. "There was a presentation at school today," said Noah in a small voice. "Each child had to talk about their family. I didn't know what to say." Matthew looked at Sarah, who was organizing the bracelets with more force than necessary. She also seemed shaken. "What did you say?" asked Matthew gently. "I said my family is just me and my mom," replied Noah. "But all the other children talked about dad, mom, siblings, grandparents. I felt different." Matthew felt an intense anger toward a man he didn't even know, toward someone who had abandoned such a special child. But he also felt a determination that surprised him. "You know what I think, Noah?" he said, choosing his words carefully. "I think family isn't just who has the same blood. Family is who cares about you, who takes care of you, who wants what's best for you. And by that definition, you have a very special family. You think. So? Asked Noah with a thread of hope in his voice. I'm sure, replied Matthew. You have a mother who loves you more than anything in the world, and you have other people who care about you too. Noah looked at him with those clear eyes and asked, Do you care about me, Matthew? Very much, he replied with a sincerity that surprised him, more than I thought was possible. The boy smiled and hugged Matthew spontaneously. It was a tight, lingering hug that made Matthew feel something he hadn't felt in decades. The sensation of being needed, of making a difference in someone's life. When they separated, Noah picked up the notebook and began to draw with renewed enthusiasm. This time he drew a school with a child in front speaking to other children, and beside the child he drew 3 hand-holding figures, a woman, a man, and a small child. Now I know what I'll say at the next presentation, he said proudly. Matthew looked at Sarah, who was observing the scene with tears in her eyes. She said nothing, but smiled at him with a gratitude that needed no words. That night, when Matthew returned home, he looked in the mirror and saw a different man. He was no longer just the successful CEO, the motivational speaker, or the billionaire entrepreneur. He was someone who mattered to a child, someone who made a difference in the world in a way that no million-dollar contract had ever provided. And for the first time in his adult life, Matthew Collins felt truly rich. The month of October brought unexpected changes for everyone. Matthew had started arriving earlier at the market, not just on Thursdays but also on Saturdays. He said it was to stretch his legs after an intense work week, but the truth was that he couldn't stay away from Sarah and Noah for long. Noah had become more talkative and affectionate, always running to hug Matthew when he saw him arriving. He began to call him Uncle Matthew spontaneously, a title that filled the man's heart with a pride he had never felt, even with his greatest professional successes. Sarah, for her part, had completely lowered her guard. She talked with Matthew about everything, her fears, her dreams, her frustrations. He discovered that she dreamed of going back to school, perhaps specializing in art therapy to work with children. He also discovered that she suffered from loneliness, that there were moments when she felt lost and overwhelmed. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing everything right, she confessed on a particularly difficult night. If I'm being a good mother, if I'm giving Noah everything he needs. You're an amazing mother, replied Matthew with conviction. Noah is a happy, loving, creative child. That doesn't happen by accident. Thank you, she said with a smile that couldn't hide the sadness. Sometimes we need to hear that. It was during this conversation that Matthew realized he was in love. It wasn't just affection or admiration. It was genuine, deep love for this strong woman who faced the world, alone with a courage he had never possessed. And it was also paternal love for Noah, a feeling that grew with each drawing shown, each hug received, each smile shared. The revelation frightened him. Matthew had built his entire life around control, planning, predictability. Loving meant vulnerability, meant giving up control, meant accepting that not everything could be negotiated or managed like a business project. On a Monday in October, Matthew made a decision that would change everything. He was in an important meeting with international investors when he received a call from Sarah. She had never called him before, and the urgency in her voice immediately concerned him. Matthew, sorry to bother you at work, she said clearly, nervous. But I need your help. Noah is in the hospital. Matthew's world stopped. He stood up from the meeting table, ignoring the surprised looks from the investors, and left the room. What happened? He asked, already running to the elevator. He fainted at school, explained Sarah with a trembling voice. The doctors say it's anemia, that he needs some tests, but I don't have money to pay for everything privately, and the public hospital has a waiting list. Which hospital? Asked Matthew, already in his car. Boston Children's Hospital, she replied. I'm on my way. Don't worry about money, okay? We'll figure this out. Matthew arrived at the hospital in 20 minutes, a personal record. He found Sarah in the waiting room with a pale face and trembling hands. She threw herself into his arms, crying with relief and desperation. He was drawing at school and suddenly collapsed, she recounted between sobs. I was so scared, Matthew. I can't lose him. He's all I have. You won't lose him, said Matthew, hugging her tightly. We'll take care of everything. And he did. He used his contacts to ensure that Noah was seen by the best hematologist in the city, paid for all the necessary tests, guaranteed that he had the best available treatment. It wasn't just about the money. It was about using all his influence and resources to protect that child who had become so important to him. While they waited for the test results, Matthew stayed at the hospital with Sarah. He cancelled all his meetings for the day, ignored Marcy's insistent calls, and simply stayed there, holding the hand of a woman who had become his family without him realizing it. Why are you doing this? Asked Sarah in a moment of silence. Doing what? He replied, although he knew exactly what she was asking. All this, paying doctors, cancelling your appointments, staying here. You barely know us. Matthew looked at her, seeing the vulnerability in her eyes, the need to understand this situation that had gone beyond any normal parameters. I know you better than I know myself, he replied, with an honesty that surprised him. You've taught me what's important in life. You've shown me what I was missing. Matthew, I'm in love with you, Sarah, he said, finally speaking aloud what he had felt for weeks. And I love Noah as if he were my son. I don't know when it happened. I don't know how it happened, but it happened. Sarah looked at him with an expression that mixed shock, joy, and fear. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious, he replied. I know we're from different worlds. I know this is complicated, but I've never felt anything like this in my life. Before she could respond, the doctor appeared with the test results. Noah had severe anemia, but nothing that couldn't be treated with medication and proper follow-up. The boy was fine, just needed special care and a more balanced diet. When they entered the room, Noah was awake, drawing on a paper that a nurse had given him. When he saw Matthew, his face lit up. Uncle Matthew, you came to see me? Of course I came, champ, replied Matthew, approaching the bed. How are you feeling? Better, said Noah. The doctor said I need to eat more vegetables and take medicine, but soon I'll be strong like a superhero. That's good, said Matthew, observing the drawing Noah was making. It was a figure of a man with a cape, holding a child's hand. That's a beautiful drawing. It's you, said Noah proudly. You're my superhero because you came to save me when I was sick. Matthew felt his eyes fill with tears. In that moment, he realized that he had spent his entire life seeking recognition, applause, trophies, but nothing had compared to being called a hero by a 7-year-old who loved him unconditionally. Noah, he said, sitting on the edge of the bed, can I tell you a secret? Sure, replied the boy, his eyes shining with curiosity. You and your mom are my superheroes, said Matthew. You saved me too. Saved you from what? Asked Noah, intrigued. From forgetting what's important in life, replied Matthew, looking at Sarah, who was observing the scene with tears in her eyes. Noah smiled and hugged Matthew. Then we're a family of superheroes, he said. Just like in comic books. Exactly, agreed Matthew. A family of superheroes. That night, when they left the hospital, Sarah finally responded to Matthew's declaration of love. They were in the parking lot, Noah sleeping in the back seat of the car, when she kissed him. It was a gentle kiss, full of fear and hope that sealed a promise neither of them had yet verbalized. I love you too, she whispered against his lips. But I'm afraid. Afraid of what? He asked. That this is temporary, she replied. That you'll get tired of our simple life and go back to your world. Matthew held her face between his hands. My world is where you are, he said, and I don't intend to go anywhere. It was the first time Matthew had absolute certainty about anything in his life. He had found his family, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. 6 months later, Matthew's life had transformed so radically that he sometimes didn't recognize the man he used to be. The luxury apartment in Beacon Hill had given way to a cozy house in Cambridge, with a yard for Noah to play in and an improvised studio for Sarah to develop her artistic projects. The company continued to thrive, but Matthew had learned to delegate responsibilities and value his free time. He arrived home every day at 6 o'clock, in time to help Noah with homework and have dinner as a family. The motivational speeches became rarer, but paradoxically more impactful, because now he talked about balance, about what really mattered in life. Noah had fully recovered from anemia and was stronger and smarter than ever. His grades at school improved significantly, and he became one of the most popular children in his class. He continued to draw obsessively, but now his favorite themes were family adventures, imaginary travels, and superheroes who saved the world with love and care. Sarah had gone back to school. Matthew encouraged her to enroll in an art therapy course, paying the tuition and taking care of Noah whenever she needed to focus on her studies. She had also set up a small online business, selling her watercolors and craft pieces to customers all over the country. For the first time in years, she felt professionally fulfilled. "I never thought it would be possible to have all this," she confessed one Saturday morning while they had breakfast in the yard of the new house. "All what?" asked Matthew, watching Noah, who was playing with a dog they had recently adopted. "A real family," she replied. "Someone who loves me for who I am, not for what I can offer. Someone who loves my son as if he were his own." "He is my son," said Matthew simply. "Maybe not biologically, but in all other respects." The official adoption had been formalized 2 months ago. Noah now legally had 2 parents, and Matthew officially had a son. The ceremony at the courthouse was simple, but moving. Noah insisted on bringing a drawing of the new family to show the judge, and everyone cried when he explained that he now had a dad who draws numbers and a mom who draws colors. The wedding took place on a Sunday morning in a small church in downtown Boston. There were few guests: Matthew's mother, who traveled from Western Massachusetts to meet the new family, some close friends, and Noah's schoolmates, whom he insisted on inviting to see Daddy and Mommy getting really married. Sarah wore a simple dress, but was radiant. Matthew dispensed with the expensive suit and opted for more casual but elegant attire. Noah was the ring bearer, wearing coordinated clothes and carrying the rings on a pillow he had decorated with drawings. During the ceremony, when the priest asked if anyone objected to the marriage, Noah raised his hand. Matthew's heart stopped for a second until the boy said with all seriousness, "I object if they don't promise we'll be a family forever." The priest smiled and asked the couple to make this special promise. Matthew and Sarah looked at each other, laughed, and promised in unison, "We promise to be a family forever." The honeymoon was in Providence, a destination that matched Sarah's love for art and history. Noah accompanied them because neither could imagine a trip without him. They visited museums, historic churches, and local artists' studios. Noah filled 3 notebooks with drawings of the landscapes and architecture they encountered. "This is the best trip of my life," he said, one afternoon when they were resting at the inn. "Why?" asked Sarah. "Because it's our first trip as a real family," he replied, with that wisdom that children sometimes demonstrate. Back in Boston, they established a routine that worked perfectly. Matthew left early for work, but returned in time to pick up Noah from school. Sarah studied in the morning and worked on her artistic projects in the afternoon. The evenings were sacred: family dinner, conversations about the day, help with homework, and always time for Noah to show his latest drawings. Thursdays became special for a different reason. Instead of going to the market as a buyer, they now had their own stall. Sarah sold her watercolors and craft pieces, Matthew helped her organize and keep accounts, and Noah charmed the customers with his stories and drawings. The stall became famous at the market, known for the quality of its products and the joy of the family that ran it. "You are an example," said a regular customer, on a particularly busy Thursday. "It's clear that you truly love each other. That's rare these days." Matthew and Sarah exchanged knowing looks. They knew they had something special, something that had been born in an unlikely way, but had become solid and lasting. It wasn't just love. It was partnership, complicity, a shared life project. Noah, now 8 years old, had become an even more confident and articulate child. His drawings evolved in technique and complexity, but continued to portray mainly happy families and moments. of togetherness. He still called Matthew uncle occasionally, but now also called him Dad naturally, without embarrassment or hesitation. "Dad," he said one night, as Matthew was putting him to bed, "can I tell you a secret?" "Of course, champ," replied Matthew, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I always knew you would be my dad," said Noah seriously. "From the first day I saw you at the market. I didn't know how, but I knew you were the person missing from our family." Matthew felt his eyes fill with tears. "How did you know?" "Because when you looked at me and my mum, your eyes were the same as Mum's when she looks at me," explained Noah. "Full of love." "You're very smart," said Matthew, kissing the boy's forehead. "I got it from Mum," replied Noah with pride. "And now I'll get it from you too." That night, Matthew and Sarah talked about the future. They wanted to expand the art business, perhaps open a physical store. Matthew was thinking about reducing his involvement in the technology company even further, focusing only on strategic decisions. Sarah wanted to finish the art therapy course and start working with children. "We have so many plans," she said, lying in Matthew's lap on the porch of the house. "And we have time for all of them," he replied, stroking her hair. "We have a whole lifetime ahead of us." "Sometimes I still can't believe all this is real," confessed Sarah, "that you appeared in our lives and changed everything." "You changed my life too," said Matthew. "You taught me that being rich has nothing to do with money. It has to do with love, with family, with moments like this." They stayed there in silence, watching the stars and listening to the sound of Noah's peaceful breathing in the next room. Three people who had met by chance at a market and discovered that they were exactly what was missing in each other's lives. The next day, Noah made a special drawing. It was a family of 3 people holding hands, walking toward the sun. Above the image, he wrote in careful handwriting, "My family forever." Matthew framed the drawing and placed it on his office desk next to a wedding photo. When clients or partners asked about the unconventional decoration for a corporate environment, Matthew proudly replied, "It's my family. It's the most important thing I have in my life." And it was true. Matthew Collins had discovered that true success isn't measured in profits or professional achievements, but in sincere smiles, tight hugs, and colorful drawings stuck to the refrigerator. He had found his family at a night market, and that family had found in him the love they always knew existed but had never dared to dream of. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Matthew, Sarah, and Noah has touched your hearts as much as it touched ours. This is a narrative about discovering that true wealth lies in the people we love, in the families we build, and in the simple moments that give meaning to life. If you were moved by this journey of love and transformation, don't forget to subscribe to our channel by clicking the button below. Leave your like if this story made you reflect on what really matters in your lives. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of human relationships and the transformative power of love. Don't miss our upcoming content and tell us in the comments which moment of this story moved you the most. Do you believe it's possible to find a family where we least expect it? Share your own stories of love and transformation. We're eager to read each comment and continue this conversation about the values that truly